go to a job that they've been assigned to. They attend some classes. They stay out of trouble. They don't have any disciplinary record, and they do their time. And they go in front of a board. They personally walk in and sit down in front of a board, like in Shawshank Redemption. And there's 5 or 3 members, and they've all got their file out, and they're asking questions and really trying to find out and get to that root of, has this person been rehabilitated? Have they experienced or expressed remorse for their offense? What things have they done since they walked through that gate? What have they done to make themselves a better person, to be a good citizen? And after careful evaluation and personal interaction, the board decides, to approve or deny, the big stamp on the paper, and you find out that day, and you get to walk back to your cell and either tell everybody I've been denied or I've been approved. And, within a week, you walk out the gate with your little bag and you're on your way home. So that's how they believe the system works. So it is shocking to them to find out that that is not at all how parole operates in the state of Texas. And I find this part of it super frustrating, especially for families, because they are so desperate to do anything they can. And they don't, when they hit these barriers as their loved one starts to go through the parole process, they are dumbfounded, they're lost, they're confused. They don't understand, because remember, they're operating from that place of belief of, this is how the system's supposed to work. This is how it does work. And in reality, it doesn't. So let's talk about what really happens in TDCJ, and I'll use my own personal experience. Got my sentence, right? Went in, and I remember that my attorney told me, he said, you've signed for 12 non-aggravated years, and I'm like, oh, I was crying. I was like, I'm gone. I'm gone for the next 10, 11, 12 years. He said, Ms. Toon, that you're eligible for parole as soon as you get there, because you've been in jail for almost a year. And I just looked at him like, that is not how this works. And I'm going to tell you right now, that's not what's going to happen. He was like, oh yeah, don't be upset. You'll get there, do your time, and you'll be able to come back into the community and do what you need to do. And I'm like, what? I couldn't understand how he, as a defense attorney, did not really understand the process of parole in Texas. So I get to Mountain View, got my non-aggravated 12, and I see parole, denied. Okay, year set off. Next year, denied. The next year, denied. And so, many of you are probably familiar with that piece of paper that they give you, right? Reasons of denial. And each one of those reasons, which I don't even know why they broke them out into sections, because they're all just one big conglomerate of reasoning, like every possible thing that they could come up with is in like one paragraph. But the reasonings on mine were nature of offense, history of substance use, and prior incomplete supervision. So those are 3 static factors that I could not change. I can't go back in time, and I can't fix those things. So each year with each denial, those were the exact reasons given to me. I finished school. I went to AA. I went to the therapeutic program that was offered on the unit, which is not the same as the rehabilitation therapeutic programs that parole gives as answers. But I did everything that I could, everything that was available to me, everything that was in my power. And every year, go in front of that interview person at the unit, who basically none of us took serious as an actual, contributing important factor in parole, because it just felt like somebody that was stamping papers and just going through this kind of, show that made us feel better. You sign a paper that says that you had an interview, but it's really just, I remember after my first denial, I was in that office for less. We would count it. We would sit at the bench and wait for our turn in. We had our lay-ins to go see parole, and we would count how long everybody was in there. And we were in there less than 2 minutes to sign that paper to say that we had our parole interview. And the lady asked, "Has anything changed?" "No, ma'am." "Okay, well, Miss Toon, maybe this year we can pray that it's this year." And I'm like, the parole lady's telling me we should just pray that just hopefully this year will be the year. And so that board that Morgan Freeman sits in front of in Shawshank Redemption, that is not how that operates. That's not how that works. In the state of Texas, the first voting member gets your file that the institutional officer has sent over, and they've got hundreds of files that they have to see. Each region has hundreds of files every month, and they look through that file, they make a decision, they send it to the next one, because there's 3 members at each regional parole board. So if the first member, says yes, no, they pass it to the second one. And if they're in agreement with the first one's answer, then that's what it is, whether it's denied or approved. If need be, they send it to the third person who breaks the tie. Meanwhile, there is no personal interaction. There are no personal questions of, "Miss Toon, how do you feel about what happened?" Or "Can we talk about some things that you've done? What do you feel like was important?" None of that happens in the state of Texas. It's a very cold, paper-driven process that excludes the person who is up for parole as a really contributing factor in the process. So, and a lot of families don't know that. Legislators don't know that. Again, they're operating from that place of where what they believe parole is and how it works. And that's just not how it works. So I was denied parole 8 times, several 1-year set-offs, and then I got a 2-year set-off. And my dad at visitation threatened to, to whoop me when I came home, because he was like, "You are lying to me. I do not understand how nothing," because he'd ask me every year, "What changed? What did you do?" And I said, "Nothing. I'm doing the same thing day after day. I'm going to work. I'm doing this." He was like, I don't understand why they would deny you. And now they've given you 2 years. So obviously something happened. And it took a lot to convince him that, no, I don't know where they got the 2 from compared to the 1, because the next year, after the 2-year set off, it was back to 1-year set offs. It's just the no rhyme or reason to the decisions that they make makes the person who's up for parole feel helpless. It makes them feel detached from their own rehabilitation. It makes them feel like they are not, again, that feeling of you're just a piece of furniture in the room and everyone's making decisions about your own life and you are not a voice in that. So what we're going to turn it over to Kirsten to talk about is our approach into trying to resolve these issues with parole and how we can be effective. Because in the past, we have tried desperately to change parole, a number of things, right? And I think that we've finally discovered that message that we've used in the past is not working. It falls on deaf ears. So we want to change that messaging to embrace something that really shows society and our legislators that the system is not what they think it is. And this is why, and these are the reasons why we need to look at it and create some effective changes to make it more efficient. So Kirsten, do you want to step in now and tell everybody the importance of our message as SLC members for this priority that we're working on, and what that message is going to be?
All right, can y'all hear me? Okay, I just got a little sign that said your internet is unstable. So I wanted to just to make sure. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kirsten Ricketts, and I'm with Restorative City Streets, a small nonprofit out of Livingston, Texas, and I'm also on the steering committee of the Statewide Leadership Council. The number one thing that I want to say before I start is that the focus of this parole reform is different because we're focusing on the budget. And so looking at it from a cost-effective dynamic is something different than what has been. If we have, oh, we need to let these people go. We need to get these people. I'm previously incarcerated. I'm stuck there. All that stuff in our personal stories that are wrapped around it do not push these people to move, but money does. And with the state being in the budget crisis that they're currently in with COVID, they need to make cuts across the board, and they need to have good reasons for doing it. So the first thing I want to say, I went and I looked up TDCJ's mission statement. And they say the mission of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice is to provide public safety, promote positive change in offender behavior, reintegrate offenders into society, and assist victims of crime. We need to call them on their stuff. We need to hold them accountable to what they say that they're doing and they're not doing. Jennifer, thank you so much for sharing your story. And I cannot even imagine what it would feel like to see parole over and over and over again, knowing that I had done everything possible to meet parole requirements and not be paroled. That must have been absolutely devastating. I think that it's very interesting that what they do when you go in, as far as the treatment plan is concerned, is that they're not giving you what you need up front. And so that is one of the messaging statements that we need to cover, is that they're coming in and they're not receiving a treatment plan up front. So what we want to do is revise a treatment plan to make sure that those who are entering the system get that treatment plan within the first 45 days that they walk onto the unit, so that they know exactly what they're dealing with. Jennifer, you had also mentioned that you could go to AA, NA, maybe some Christian recovery group or whatever, but none of that, or a certificate that you might get from that, would do anything to move parole on your behalf as far as it comes to alcohol and drug abuse issues. And that's like one of the denials that they use, like across the board. If you have any sort of substance abuse background, they will deny you on that, but they have their own little program that they want you to go to. Now, surely they knew that when you entered TDCJ to begin with. So why didn't they tell you at your first set off, you haven't met the requirement that we need you to make for substance abuse, so we're going to send you to that class so you can go home? That just makes sense. So over the years of them resetting, we've now reached a standpoint where the average age of the inmate inside the Texas Department of Corrections is 51 years of age. Well, what has that done to our healthcare costs? In 2017, the healthcare of the inmates was $500 million. In 2019, it was $750 million. That's unbelievable, that our tax-paying money is going to these healthcare costs for these inmates that should have been paroled 20 years ago. So on that note, let me see what I've got over here. Okay, so y'all like that? I got all my little notes. I got stuff posted everywhere. I didn't want to get off track. So evidently what we're doing is we're turning our nursing homes into prisons. Our sentence lengths are getting longer, and parole approval rates are, they deny people at 50% or 50,000 people were denied of parole last year. The talking points as you're going, I guess Maggie is going to cover some action plans later on at the end, but the number one thing is that each individual needs to program, substance abuse programming or sex offender programming or whatever programming that they want to send somebody to prior to parole eligibility. Okay. And we want to base the parole decisions on whether or not the person has completed the rehabilitative process instead of based on the nature of the crime or something that it is out of their control for them to change the circumstance thereof. We also want transparency from the parole board. So if the parole board is voting yes or they're voting no, we want to know why voted that way. So transparency from the board, changes in the ITP program, and the total focus on the budget and saving money, the cost effectiveness of allowing people to do the treatment that's needed so that they can be released in a timely manner and reintegrated into society based on what TDCJ says their mission statement already is. And if you want to add something to that, go ahead. I don't think I filled up 15 minutes, but that's really about all I got.
Girl, you getting me fired up. I was starting to sweat and I'm like, yeah, you preach it. Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to make a comment on what you said, and thank you for your kind words. It was devastating. It was devastating. First of all, my family to believe that I was lying to them and that I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do, because a lot of the women I knew had children and their children didn't understand. Why doesn't mommy care about us and love us that she keeps acting up in there and she won't come home? And I would hear this in visitation and watch women cry and say, baby, I am doing everything I can. So it is a level of despair, and just to build your hopes and dreams up every year and to have them crushed immediately. And the effect it has on community, right? Because you may have gotten a job in the community. Maybe somebody at the church or someone in your neighborhood, you said, told your family, look, I'll hire her. I've got a place ready and a position ready. They need to know, is she coming home or not? Well, I don't know. She got this program that's got a 6-month wait list, and we don't know when she's going to be released. So I really appreciate everything that you just said, and those are our message points. Yes, ma'am, Miss Judy.
I have a
Sure.
question. Can you hear me? When the officer and they write the treatment 45 correct, and if there's no oversight of the treatment plan that it's being followed, what's the point? And why can there not be an independent oversight committee or whatever? I know you'd have to have thousands of people doing this, but I don't understand if no one's looking and saying, you haven't seen a psychiatrist in 3 months, why not? Let's fix it. And secondly, friend has been lined up for the changes class for over a year, and they keep saying there's no opening, when it's not the offender's fault, but the things that he's done instead of the rap books and so much improvement. There needs to be, if they can't offer the classes, there needs to be an alternate that they can do. And they're really, this treatment, when I had students, I don't know if with it, but we had an educational plan based on that student. This is what the teachers would do to make progress for the student. And if we didn't follow it, we could lose our jobs. And it was a federal law that you had to have an individual educational plan in place, which is the same, but they don't seem to really care that there's really a treatment plan for the offender. So I really somehow that if they're going to write, they need to be accountable that the offender can work the plan.
Absolutely. You're absolutely correct, Ms. Judy. Because what is the point? Because TDCJ will say that we have an ITP. We have that. But, and so they tell legislators, they tell people in the community, well, that part is not new because we already have that. Yeah, but it's not effective. And it's like, for instance, when I did ask for mine from classification, it was sent to me on an I-60, and it was the same things that were written in my file when I was 19 years old. So I'm serious, I'm not kidding. So you're right, nobody is overseeing that process, and that is something like Kirsten talked about that definitely needs to change. Go ahead. Kirsten.
There is the rehabilitative services, the programs division. And so what this would include is a change in the risk factors according to the program division. So there would be an entity within TDCJ that would be evaluating the progress. They would be looking at what the parole board has said, and then they would be giving their input to the requirements that the individual has met on the treatment plan towards parole, which is something that is not happening at this time. So there are solutions included in this bill which do cover that area.
Thank you, Kirsten. Maggie, do you want to go ahead? Hold on one second, Miss Judy. Do you want to go ahead and maybe put us into two smaller groups so everybody feels included in the conversation?
Yes, Helen raised her hand real quick.
Okay, sure. Yeah, go for it.
Hi. So a quick question, and that is, most of what you're talking about for the sort of legislative agenda has to do with more the kind of decision-making process and sort of those who are eligible, how the decision is getting made. I'm curious whether you're also thinking at all about expanding eligibility for how quickly people could even come up for parole, and sort of trying to revisit the changes in 1997 about discretionary, mandatory supervision, or when ag offenses have to serve 50% of their time.
So that's a great question, and no. So we are basically focusing our messaging, like Kirsten said, about making the process more effective, and we're not really addressing eligibility or sentencing or anything like that, because sometimes when they hear that, you want more people to be paroled, or you want them to parole faster, or it kind of puts them in that old mindset of, not that those things aren't important and that they don't need to be addressed. But for our purposes, this session, when we talk about parole, we're really trying to hone the message of, we're not asking people to be released. We're just letting you know how much it costs when you continue to deny them. And you're denying them because the process is not effective. So the person incarcerated wants to feel intricately a part of that process. And if you allow that, I think that and you allow more of that oversight and accountability with the individual treatment plans, we're going to see the parole board be able to make more effective decisions, because that kind of makes them feel a little bit more at ease, like, oh yeah, that makes sense, like effective. But when they start hearing, eligibility, or changes in sentencing or eligibility, we just feel like at this point, it's just not the direction we want to go with our messaging for this priority.
Can I ask a follow-up question then?
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the eligibility, the decision-making process, have you given any thought, or have you, I think I know the answer maybe, but to trying to streamline the decision-making process such that for certain folks who have met all of the, let's say you have sort of this better, more transparent treatment plan, that there would be a way of trying to do kind of an administrative parole where they would get an automatic approval as long as they'd met all the requirements of the treatment plan, and with the argument that then the parole board will have the resources to put more attention and more thought into the folks who maybe have either higher needs or are going to be more complicated parole requests, so that you can sort of have a certain category of folks who, unless there is something, a red flag in their record, they would automatically go through, and other people would then have more in-depth sort of shifting the parole board resources, so that it's not everybody's not getting a 2-minute parole hearing, but some people get, through quickly, and other people will have more in-depth parole review.
Well, and that's a really great point. But I think we decided as a council that anything that sounds like the parole board, their discretion is being taken from them, and it's like, okay, because that sounds a lot like mandatory supervision. Like, well, then you've fulfilled this, we've checked it off, and it's mandatory. You automatically are granted parole. Theoretically, we would all love that. That would make more sense. But we just feel like that's not really where we're at. That's really not part of our message, because we fear that is kind of going to get more away from just us wanting to make the process more effective. Now, in terms of like the ITB and them being held accountable for it, not only are we held accountable, but the parole board is too. Okay, so if you have met those things, the parole board, if they deny you, has to really explain to you why. Because, all right, well, I got all my stuff checked off on my ITP, and you agree with that, and someone is giving that oversight, like Kirsten said, from the rehabilitation programs, then you need to explain yourself. So there is this mechanism of what you just mentioned that we have talked about, that we really want to see that there. But in terms of anything like that sounds remotely like taking their discretion, I would love for them to not have that discretion. It just be, you check the boxes off, you completed it, you go. But that's just not something that has ever gone over well when it comes to like changing things with parole. Thank you. It was a great question.
Okay, so I have 3 rooms we're gonna break off into, and I'm gonna put the questions that we want you to talk about in the chat. So I'm gonna put it in the chat now, and I think you'll be able to get it, access it whenever you're in your groups. And we'll come back in 15 minutes and talk about an action plan. Okay?
Okay.
See you in a minute. So I hope everybody had like good conversations about how parole should be working. And so now we're at the action. So we are filing a bill that will hopefully be passed this session, that will be asking for an ITB plan to be given within 45 days of their intake. So that way, by the time they hit that first parole date, they already know what they need to have been done or doing or whatever. And then we're also asking if their risk assessment can be redone once they completed that whatever in their ITP plan. So this would, we're not asking for them parole reform and just let everybody out. That's not what we're trying to do. We just want this system to run more efficiently. Just to where we're not getting cuts in our education, cuts in human services, cuts in CPS. We can save so much money just by allowing the system to work as it's supposed to, instead of leaving it the way it is right now and spending $1 billion a year just because you're saying no, and we don't even know why you said no. So you've been locked up 10 years and now you have to go to drug rehab. It doesn't even make sense. So now we have 10 years that you've been locked up and you don't have any drugs in your system. So the system is just
Or
backwards.
you shouldn't have any drugs in your system. Let's
Oh,
put it
yeah.
that way.
Okay. It's a whole different webinar.
Right, exactly. Let's be real now. You know what goes on behind them walls.
So we're just asking, so Monday is the beginning of bill filing. Session is creeping up slowly. So as the statewide leadership council, we are trying to spread across Texas and have people go into their DA's office, talk to their county judges, talk to your local officials, and ask them not to cut our education, not to cut our health and human services. If we could just and present to them how parole should be working. So we are not running a nursing home. Yes, Helen said geriatric parole is another, I just lost it, is another possible way to expand eligibility, which is correct. Yes. I mean, these are all things that our public officials need to be talking about. They need to be, half of them don't even know how parole works. We have to tell them. We are paying them to work for us. So one of the statewide leadership council's mission is to move across Texas and make sure that all of our officials know how to get these people paroled properly. And so we really strongly suggest you find out who represents you. You can go to the Texas Legislative Online. I always have a hard time with that. And then put in your zip code and you can find out who represents you. You can contact your offices. You can send emails, letters. And then whenever we start session, they'll be having public testimony. You can come testify. We don't know how session's going to work yet, but the ideal thing is that we'll be there being able to testify and not only have the numbers that are the data of how much money we're spending, but we'll also have the stories of people who have died in there because the system's not working. They're dying and they could have been out on parole. COVID has run rampant through our prisons, and to take the pressure off TDCJ is the smartest thing to do. It would save us a lot of money, and we are going into a big budget crisis. So that's it. That's all I have to say. Jennifer, do you have anything else to say?
So, and you mentioned that testimony. So if you go to TLO, which is the Texas Legislative Online, I'm sorry, tongue twister. And I check it every day. I check it for work, but I also check for the criminal justice stuff. And every committee has, well, the Senate hasn't posted anything yet, but the House has. And they've posted requests for information, what are known as interim charges, requests for information. And it will give you the question that they're seeking. They want more information on it. And then you are allowed to make a comment, and it explains to you how you do that. And there's a few that have already posted the public comments that have made, like organizations sign on to letters, or just citizens are allowed to do that. So you can actually go in there and look at all the committees and look at all the requests for information. If you've got a comment or you've got something you want to say about it, there's the instructions on how to write those and how to submit them. And anybody can do that. So I highly encourage everybody to take a look at that. I'll post the link in the chat if you've never used that website before. And like I said, you can keep up with it. And we encourage you to go out into your communities, reach out to those people like Maggie said, and also your faith-based community, get your churches involved. And they need to hear our message about why we want to see parole be more effective. And it's up to us to get that message out. Kirsten, do you have any? Go
I have a
ahead.
question.
I want to add one thing. Statewide Leadership Council is launching the 100 Days to Justice campaign, and we will be using the hashtag SLC 100. And this 100 Days of Justice will be leading up to sometime in session, but we're trying to get 100 clergy member, 100 judges, 100 DAs all across Texas to sign on to a more efficient system.
Okay.
So that's the hashtag we're going to be using. I will be sending out information on that. I'll also on Facebook, I'll put the link that Jennifer had just talked about. And I'll add more information about the 100 days. And if you want to join the SLC, go to the website and just put in your information. And please join us in this fight to change the way Texas runs its criminal justice system.
Okay. All right. I have a question, Jennifer. Did you say on one of the last meetings that we had that the suggested language for the ITP has already been created?
Maggie,
For-
y'all
for-
already have that?
I have the suggested language, but did you say that there was an actual one that had that you guys were going with that you had created already?
No, we have not.
Okay.
That's different webinar.
For
So-
so this is for the ITP plan for the legislation?
Okay, so it's the legislation that we're working on
Mhm.
is to make sure that they have their ITP plan.
Okay.
We're not messing with that right
Messing
now.
with the ITP plan itself. Okay, gotcha.
And Helen, the Statewide Leadership Council is formally system impacted people. So if you have a loved one, family member, you've been incarcerated, if you have experience with this justice legal system, you can be a part of the Statewide Leadership Council. And Jennifer just
Tell
put,
me, what
Ma'am?
is the hashtag?
it's hashtag
What was,
SLC 100. Yes.
Person, do you have anything to add before we close out?
There is an Advocacy 101 in Livingston, Texas, November 21st. So anybody who wants to come and get involved in advocacy, we're going to start at the ground roots, what that looks like, and spend the day together, and we'll serve you lunch. So come out and see us.
And we'll post more information about that on the Facebook page.
And just for fans of the three of us, we will all three be there. So that may be, more enticing than even lunch. I know I'm going for the lunch. I'm just kidding.
I'll bring pie.
Yeah, and it's Representative James White's district, so we will show up and show out.
And where, and when is it?
It's the 21st, and it's in Livingston, and I will post more information about it on the Facebook page. And so it's 6 o'clock. I don't want to hold anybody, but we will stay on until the last person logs off. So, but thank you all for being here. This has been great.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, ladies. Good
Thank
night.
you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.